So I had this big segmented review written out for months. I was going to write this critical review about Night in the Woods, the millennial furry game from 2017 that we all need in our lives. Except, of course, I hated it, and I wanted to write out in great detail why. And it sat around on my desktop for months, this Word document. I would open it up every now and again, and I even wondered what I would title the video, the scathing review of a game I know some people adored. And as more time went by, I realized maybe a more straightforward approach wasn't what I wanted to do. There's something else that I wanted to parse here that goes beyond what anyone else who has reviewed the game would do. There's something important to me about Night in the Woods that I don't think anyone's going to talk about, which for me was the game's setting. And rather than go on to this giant spiel about how and why I dissect Night in the Woods, I wanted to bring in what I like about the game, what I wanted it to be, what I saw the game could be but wasn't. And maybe through pulling bits and pieces from another game, I could create this monster and make it a more relatable experience for everyone. I wanted to go deeper than I didn't relate to, root for, or like the main character, to instead Night in the Woods, or what it is like to grow up in Twin Peaks. Night in the Woods and the TV series Twin Peaks have a lot of the same faults to me as a viewer or player, whatever the heck you want to call it. They both introduce a town with a cast of characters, some super likable, some super unlikable, and through a long series of misadventure which may or may not go anywhere, there's a supernatural element and a non-ending. I left Twin Peaks wanting more of the crazy shenanigans. I wanted more supernatural elements. I was tired of the drama and the affairs, and all of the actual weird stuff came off as afterthoughts that weren't woven into the story as well as they could be. There was no descent into madness, nor were there hints that all was not what it seems. Weird things come and go in the same episode, giving you no time to process it. You get the imagery of the literal pale horse, and in the next episode you know who the murderer is. There's no horses appearing over many episodes or from the start or anything. Just here's a horse. Next episode, we know who the murderer is. Why did you bring in the horse? There's no build up of symbolism or imagery, no time to digest anything. Going on the Wikipedia is people just grasp at straws and strings and pull things that make no sense from anywhere. Nothing is explained in the universe text that is the show. And that's where it falls. That's where Twin Peaks becomes a letdown. It ends with the forced Cooper romance. It's so forced just to create this final confrontation drama that ultimately leads nowhere. It takes the weirdness and the supernatural and decides, nah, what people really want are affairs. Let's talk about affairs. And by the time I got through it all, it felt like a blur with some neat events that I wish were woven better. You can basically get all of Twin Peaks' best bits on YouTube. You can look up all the weird bits on YouTube, or even better, look up The Simpsons references to Twin Peaks, and you got the whole series. That's the best you're going to get from Twin Peaks, are those scenes, and nothing else. The supernatural weird elements don't feel natural to the setting. They feel copy and pasted on. It feels less like Twin Peaks is cursed, and more like Agent Cooper is, which is a nice take, but makes more for tired cutaway drama than anything else. Twin Peaks, for all the things it did right, did not utilize the setting as well as it could have. It was stuck in convention. It played by the rules too much, so you get what could have been an interesting supernatural detective story boggled down with daytime soap opera dynamics, and it's a tired ordeal to slog through episode by episode. Twin Peaks could take place in almost any town, or any neighborhood. The fact it is Twin Peaks doesn't matter to Twin Peaks. as far as I'm concerned. The plot elements they introduce at the end to tie it together, they're weak. If you had put them at the beginning, or you had set up something at the start, it would have been so much better. Contrast this with Twin Peaks' video game child, Deadly Premonition. You start the game 5 minutes in, you know 2 things. Number 1, our Agent Cooper is off somehow. Wherever our Agent Cooper is right now is also off. Somehow. You learn this immediately before any other part of the game. Once you get out of that part of the game, you're met with this cutscene showing you the town that looks not unlike the town in Twin Peaks. You might be saying, wait, Claire, Twin Peaks intro shows the town off too. And you're right. There's set pieces where it does. What do you know about Twin Peaks by the end? What goes on there, other than it being a small town? What weirdness went on before the murders? Aside from the log lady and Hawk telling us exposition, we don't have much other introduction. It all culminates by the end, but by the time you get to the end, it's a huge rush of details and madness that feels super glued onto Twin Peaks, not part of Twin Peaks itself. When you get to Greenvale, you have a nice introduction. And then you have the map before you. You can explore the entire town. It's all at your disposal. And numerous times there's talk about how nice a small town is. Despite one small, crucial detail, the town shuts down when it rains. Suddenly, we're given a point in the universe to the setting. Suddenly, we have a sticking point why the town is weird. Something is in the water, so to speak. Or the air, or something. This makes sense given the events that transpire. Something indeed is in the air at Greenvale, and the town is affected and sickened. That open map before you now also lets you explore the town and its people at your leisure. Unlike Twin Peaks, which is jumping around at breakneck speed to show you every affair, in Greenvale, you can take your time to see what each and every person does throughout their day. Aside from the main missions, you have time to relax and explore and meet who you want to. There's side quests, and this pace and these characters and the setting set you up for a supernatural experience that feels more genuine. It doesn't need convention. It doesn't need every character having an affair, though they do exist. All it needs is a cast of characters for you to explore or not explore, and a plot for you to enjoy in a small town that from the get-go doesn't do well when it rains. All from the point of view of a likable agent who you also get to hear ramble about movies as you drive around exploring the town. Play Deadly Premonition for maybe half an hour, and you have a better lore backbone and introduction than you do in one episode of Twin Peaks. And that's what I think a lot of people felt turned off about Deadly Premonition, was how weird it was right out the gate. There was no introduction to anything. You're put in like that, and now you're in the weirdness. The introduction to the weird is the weird. There is no breathing period. So by the time the ending happens, for those who stick around, and the shit hits the fan, you're already exposed and ready to believe what Deadly Premonition throws at you. In Twin Peaks, as much as I like your ending, falters. As I have very little emotional connection to everyone involved other than Cooper, and it feels like an afterthought that they ran out of money to see through to the end. Saturday Night Night in the Woods. What does any of this mean? Take Night in the Woods' first 10 minutes. Where are we and what does it matter? We are in the Rust Belt. We are in, if I may go even further, Western Pennsylvania. Why is this important? Because unlike every other reviewer you've probably seen, I grew up there. I want to tell you how Night in the Woods fares on the spectrum of weaving in the supernatural elements to your setting with Twin Peaks at 0 and Deadly Premonition at a 10. How does it fare? How does adding supernatural ungodly terror to a small, perhaps struggling small town fare? The setting as a whole is perfect. It is the strongest aspect of this game to me. It is why I got the game. It is how it was pitched to me. A cute game whose artist is from Western PA and has darker elements. And to be sure, the game sets up pegs for us in those first 10 minutes. It opens not with a cutscene, but with bits of seemingly random choices that paint a picture of the main character, her friends, and the place she grew up. When you open into the actual game, you meet our first character, the janitor, who gives off this feeling that he knows more about what's going to happen to you than you do. He comes and goes without a trace. He leaves you in the dark, literally, and then you slowly have to make your way into town proper, crawling through abandoned playgrounds, seeing the abandoned glass factory in the background, commenting on bits and pieces of everything as you go. This is how the game opens. You aren't driven into town on a nostalgia trip of wonder. You're crawling through the mud and rusted bits of the past and the present, only to arrive home in a police car for trespassing. This is not a glamorous intro, but it shows you how the Rust Belt is, something faded, worn out, still standing, a skeleton of its former self. From there, the game opens up to you. As the days go on, you're left to your own devices. Just like Deadly Premonition, you can follow the main quest or meander about, slowly meeting other characters who may have nothing to do with the entire plot at your leisure, taking the surrounding town setting as you do, even discovering things like abandoned parade floats or hanging out at the abandoned grocery store in your food famine of a town. On the first day, however, you're routed through certain events which culminate in what I think is a giant whiplash of the game. The arm. You discover this arm in maybe the first hour of play. It's the first sign this game is darker than you thought. It's the first sign that something in this town isn't quite right. So where does it go wrong? From the onset, it seems like this is following Deadly Premonition's way of doing things. You go about your own pace, slowly opening up the game's supernatural elements and meeting new and relevant characters, but in Night in the Woods' case, its fall isn't in how the supernatural elements are incorporated, but rather the pacing of how they're incorporated. Night in the Woods is a brilliant picture of fictionalized Western PA town. From the references to strikes gone wrong, to the gray morality of the rich stand-in for Andrew Carnegie, it's all there. For me, watching or playing Night in the Woods was like an I Spy book of references to where I grew up, to things I recognized and experienced, with a backdrop of characters I didn't always enjoy. But the main difference between Night in the Woods and Deadly Premonition is the pacing. Where Night in the Woods takes a while to get going, it really takes a while. May's walking speed is so slow, and there's very little to do to make it go faster. And while even the completionist Night in the Woods time is shorter than Deadly Premonition's, it's still a slog. The game feels slower than it actually is, with in-game days between the first dark supernatural element, the arm, and the next Halloween, making everything feel like Twin Peaks. It isn't the town that's cursed, it's May. And that loops us back around to Deadly Premonition's first point. As I said, our agent is off. Something off about Agent York that we, as players, know immediately. However, at the same time, we're shown that what's going on in Greenvale is not just his imagination. We see other characters react and comment on it. The town's lore, things close when it rains, tell us the town is aware of these elements. Something is going on in York's mind, but it ain't the shadows. With Night in the Woods and Twin Peaks, however, the pacing and timing paints a picture that it is going on in our main character's mind. And that's where Night in the Woods falls apart. In the case of Night in the Woods, the game makes sure you play nightmare scenarios in between the days. These, coupled with May's anger issues, her journal, and reckless behavior, paint a picture of a young adult who has severe mental illness, perhaps triggered by stress at school to the point she can't even react appropriately to defending a dismembered arm. May confirms later when she talks about the shapes, when she had the breakdown and beat up another character. May comes off as someone whose mental illness will be resolved. She leads her friends on a wild goose chase that ends up with her in the hospital. That is how Night in the Woods should have ended, to make it feel like Deadly Premonition does. It leads you to believe the story about the Rust Belt, only to pull the rug out from under you. The Rust Belt isn't supernatural at all. It's very much real, and we have to come to terms with that, and the scars it left behind. May has to get help and come to terms with the possibility of her family losing their home. She has to come to terms with her friends moving away and building herself back to be something. She has to find a purpose. Instead, Night in the Woods takes its time to build the story up, showing us a character who is really dealing with mental illness and then backtracks to confirm instead there is no mental illness at all. It's just a supernatural cult. The cult immediately turns the Rust Belt town into something of a joke. These are people struggling to make ends meet, and also they sacrifice people to a behemoth, in the mines. It takes away any plight of the town and makes it fantastic. The economy might tank, but it's okay. We have a pet Cthulhu to feed, and everything will go right as rain. Western PA has no lore about beasts in the mines that you sacrifice unsavory locals to. There's no lore at all about anything supernatural in the town that we're forced to see early on. The best we have is the missing Casey. We have the Twin Peaks situation where supernatural things go on, but very little to show for it. So by the time we get to the end, it feels less like a culmination and more like a rush project that you sent out the night before it was due just to get a decent enough grade on. Night in the Woods builds up stakes from thin air. May and the gang leave a sizable portion of the town to die in the mines, but we see no consequences of these actions. I thought maybe they'd be the people we see going across town to town council. No, we see them after the epilogue. No one is missing from the town. No one comments on the missing men. It would have been a lot stronger had we seen or heard comments on the missing characters, the torn apart families of the otherwise debilitated town. The main characters just murdered these folks and their hometown in the process, and there's little to show for it. At the end of A Deadly Premonition, York goes off to be with Emily, and Zach can go on his way, having loose ends tied up in his mind. In Twin Peaks, we end on the still shot of the Blade Agent Cooper. At the end of Night in the Woods, we have May in the same Rust Belt town that she entered in at the start, directionless. She is no better nor worse off than she was at the start, and that is where Night in the Woods falls on the spectrum, stagnated in the middle. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed the first video. It's really flawed. There's a lot I probably could have done better, but you know, it's done. It's out. If you're listening to this, you sat through it, so thank you for that. Special thanks to everyone I borrowed footage from. They will be scrolling past now, hopefully. Special thanks to the music I used, which is also scrolling by now, hopefully. If you enjoyed this, or at least didn't hate it, I have a Patreon and a Ko-Fi, and I hope to be doing these videos on a monthly basis, but also hope to be doing art type videos on a weekly basis. So if you like speed paints and stuff like that, I'll be doing those in the future, hopefully. So stick around. In time, these will get better in quality, I hope. If you want to see what I'm working on, go ahead and check out my Patreon. Maybe drop some money in my Ko-Fi. That'd be great. Help support me and whatever the heck I'm doing, jumping into the deep end of doing video essays. Holy crap. So thank you. Leave a comment, do all that fun shenanigans every channel tells you to do. We all know what the drill is. We all know. Go ahead and do all that. And I'll see you next time.